AITAH for leaving my husband after he won a large sum of money. I'm 32F, and I've been married to my husband, Ryan, 36M, for almost 10 years. We met in college when we were young, idealistic, and barely had a penny to our names. Back then, we were a team, facing every challenge together, dreaming of building a life. We never had much, but it didn't matter because we had each other. When Ryan graduated, he landed a job in a specialized field that required a lot of physical labor, something he was proud of. He worked long hours, doing what he loved and putting food on the table while I built my career. It wasn't always easy, but we managed to scrape by. We'd fantasize about our future over cheap takeout, laughing about how someday we'd live in a house with a yard and a decent car. We never really thought much about luxury or wealth. We just wanted a comfortable life. But then, a few years ago, everything changed. Ryan was in a horrible accident at work. It shattered our lives in ways I still struggle to describe. He suffered serious injuries that left him unable to work in his field ever again. The physical pain was one thing, but I think what hurt him even more was losing his identity, his sense of purpose. Suddenly, he couldn't be the man he thought he'd always be. He started picking up odd jobs where he could, but they were far from what he'd trained for. The paychecks were small, and he felt like he was failing me, failing us. During those years, I tried to hold us both together. I picked up extra shifts at my job, a job I genuinely love, and took on more responsibilities to help us stay afloat. We had to downsize, cut back on luxuries like eating out or taking weekend trips. But I never resented him for it. How could I? He was my husband, and we were in this together. We found joy in small things. A movie night at home, a walk in the park, a shared laugh when things got too tough. Then came the lawsuit against his old company. It dragged on for years, but when it finally settled last year, Ryan won a significant sum of money, multi-millions. It was more than we ever dreamed of having. At first, it felt like our prayers had been answered, like maybe we could finally catch a break. But it didn't take long for me to realize that this windfall wasn't the blessing I thought it would be. Instead, it became the beginning of the end of the life we'd built together. The settlement transformed Ryan in ways I never could have anticipated. At first, I thought his newfound confidence was a good thing. After years of struggling with his self-esteem, he seemed to have some of that old spark back. But it quickly turned into something else, something ugly and unfamiliar. He became obsessed with status and appearances, things that had never mattered to him before. Ryan insisted on buying a new house in a gated community. Huge, sprawling, with rooms we didn't even know what to do with. He traded in our sensible cars for a sports car and an SUV that could only be described as obnoxious. At first, I went along with it because I thought he deserved a little indulgence after everything he'd been through. But it didn't stop there. He started looking down on our friends and family, the same people who had supported us during the hardest times. He complained that they didn't get us anymore, that they couldn't understand our new life. At first, I brushed it off as him just wanting to protect his newfound status. But then I saw the way he'd sneer at our old friends, calling them pathetic for being satisfied with their modest homes and regular jobs. "Why would you ever be happy living paycheck to paycheck?" he'd say, shaking his head. "It's depressing. I can't believe we used to live like that." It made my stomach turn. These were people who had welcomed us into their lives, who had shown up with casseroles when Ryan was in the hospital, who had slipped us a little cash when things were tight. I tried to reason with him, to remind him that we weren't any better than them just because we had more money now. But he would just roll his eyes and call me naive. "You don't get it, do you?" he'd say. "We've made it, Kate. We're better than that now. You need to start acting like it." He became fixated on appearances, constantly pressuring me to change, to fit this new image of what a rich couple should be. He bought me designer clothes, dresses, handbags, shoes, none of which were my style. I tried to appreciate the gesture, but it felt like he was dressing up a version of me that didn't exist. I missed my comfortable jeans, my cozy sweaters, but Ryan would get upset when I didn't wear the outfits he'd picked out, calling me ungrateful and accusing me of not wanting to embrace our new life. He insisted on eating at high-end restaurants, places that charged more for a single meal than we used to spend on groceries for a week. I used to love our date nights at Buffalo Wild Wings or grabbing a burger from a food truck. But whenever I suggested it, he'd scoff and say, "We're not those people anymore, Kate. We have standards now." It wasn't just about the money, though. It was like he'd lost all sense of who he used to be, of the values we once shared. He became increasingly controlling, demanding that I quit my job. He'd frame it as a way to enjoy life together, but I knew better. He was embarrassed that I still wanted to work, that I refused to let go of the things that had always mattered to me. "Why do you insist on making us look like we're struggling?" he'd demand. "You don't have to work anymore." It's pathetic, but I love my job. It gave me a sense of purpose, a way to feel connected to the world outside our fancy new house. And honestly, it kept me sane when everything else in my life felt like it was spiraling out of control. I tried to explain that to him, but he never seemed to hear me. He only cared about how things looked, and apparently, I was making us look bad. The breaking point came when he started pressuring me to get plastic surgery. It started with small comments, suggestions that I might want to freshen up my appearance now that we could afford it. He'd talk about how much he loved me, but wouldn't I look even better with a little bit of work done? A nose job, a boob job, maybe even that surgery where they remove the bottom rib to make your waist smaller. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Ryan, I'm not interested in changing myself," I told him. "Why can't you accept me the way I am?" He shrugged, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "We have the money now, Kate. Why wouldn't you want to look your best? Don't you want to fit in with the kind of people we're around now?" But that was the thing, I didn't. I didn't want to be someone who cared more about appearances than about being kind, about being genuine. I didn't want to change myself just to fit into a world that I'd never asked to be a part of. And most of all, I didn't want to become the kind of person Ryan had turned into. We went to couples therapy, and for a while I thought maybe it would help. But every session seemed to end the same way, with Ryan dismissing the therapist's suggestions, insisting that I was the one who needed to change. He couldn't see how much he'd hurt me, how much he'd changed. He'd say all the right things in front of the therapist, but as soon as we were in the car, it was back to the same arguments. One night, after another failed therapy session, he exploded. "You're just holding me back, Kate. If you can't get on board with the life I'm trying to give us, maybe we're better off without each other." And that's when I realized that he was right. Maybe we were better off without each other. At least, I was better off without this version of him. The man I had married would never have said something like that to me. But the man sitting in front of me, dripping with contempt, was a stranger. The decision to leave wasn't easy. I agonized over it for weeks, replaying every moment in my head. I kept thinking about how people would judge me if I walked away now. Everyone would think I was a gold digger, that I'd left Ryan as soon as he got rich. They wouldn't see the years we spent struggling together, the sacrifices we made for each other. They wouldn't understand how much he'd changed. But then I thought about the life I wanted, the life I had always wanted. A life where I could be myself, where I could love the simple things, where I didn't have to apologize for not fitting into someone else's mold. I thought about raising a family in a house filled with laughter and kindness, not status symbols and superficiality. And I realized that I couldn't have that life with Ryan anymore. So one evening, after another argument about my refusal to change, I told him I was done. I told him I wanted a divorce. He stared at me like I'd slapped him, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're just going to walk away? After everything I've done for you?" I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "I'm not walking away because of the money, Ryan. I'm walking away because I don't recognize you anymore. I can't be with someone who treats people the way you do. Who treats me the way you do?" He scoffed, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. "You'll regret this, Kate. You'll see what it's like out there without me. You'll come crawling back." But I knew in my heart that I wouldn't. As painful as it was to leave, it was even more painful to stay and watch the man I once loved disappear into someone I couldn't stand to be around. I packed my things, and I walked out of the mansion that had come to feel like a gilded cage. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small apartment, far more modest than the life Ryan had built for us. It wasn't much, but it felt like mine. I went back to work, throwing myself into the job I'd fought so hard to keep, and reconnected with the friends I'd distanced myself from during the height of Ryan's obsession with appearances. To my surprise, many of them welcomed me back with open arms, understanding more than I'd expected. They'd seen how much Ryan had changed, and they'd watched me struggle to hold on to the person I used to be. It turns out, people can see more than we give them credit for. And as for Ryan, I heard through the grapevine that he was living the high life, lavish parties, luxury vacations, surrounding himself with people who shared his newfound priorities. But the thought of him no longer filled me with the same sadness it once had, because I realized that I didn't need his wealth or his approval to find happiness. I was enough, just as I was. So AITAH? I still wonder sometimes if I did the right thing. If I should have fought harder to save my marriage. If I should have tried to adjust to the new life Ryan wanted. But then I think about the nights when I cried myself to sleep, feeling like I'd lost everything that made me me. I think about the person I used to be, the person I'm finding again, and I know that I made the choice I had to make. So, Reddit, AITAH for leaving my husband after he won a large sum of money? Or, did I just do what I needed to do to save myself?